I think, well, I'm not allowed. I'm not offended when people say they do believe in God.
But Brian is making an interesting point there, which is that it's sort of bad news. And another way of looking at it is a way of reassessing your actual place in the universe and finding whatever worth you need to find there without subbing it out, as you say, to some higher power. For me, I don't care whether it's bad or good news or whether it finds you another way of living your life. Well, I don't think it's the responsibility of truth to give you those things. No. The truth is the truth.
This way of thinking, I mean, you mentioned about atoms. I mean, again, Carl Sagan said that we're an atoms. We're atoms thinking about atoms. That's what we are. And that's I wouldn't claim
we are the things that make the universe think of itself or something. Yeah, aware of itself.
And the thing is that's a remarkable thing. So I wouldn't claim to have a complete understanding of that. It's a remarkable thing. We don't know how consciousness emerged yet. No. We may well do. What we do know, though, is that life, well, but almost certainly began on Earth as an outgrowth of geology.
Yeah.
So you have a dead planet, which is geologically active, and at some point, geochemistry becomes biochemistry. Yeah. And then given 4 billion years after that, you get things like us. That, to me, is a remarkable story. And what it tells us is, I think it's better than religion, because what it really does is say we are so lucky to be here and we are responsible for our actions now and our fate in the future. This civilization is responsible for itself.
There is nothing as beautiful.
That's what we don't understand.
Of course.
And we don't. If we could practice that.
I agree with that, and I agree with what you. But one thing I would say is, when scientists like you or sometimes someone like Richard Dawkins says, but what about, once we can leave this behind, the God thing, we can talk about the wonder of the universe. I agree that the universe is wonderful, but I also think, well, you shouldn't feel the need to say that. You don't actually, it's not your responsibility to provide something nice and wonderful to replace religion. If it was just terrible and awful, if you wanted to say, so it means we're completely random and our life is meaningless, if that's the truth, it's the truth. And for me, the truth is always what you should head for. Whether you want to colour it with wonder or whether you want to say it's cold and meaningless and dull. I don't care.
But you're
I'm interested only in the truth.
But then in a way, those people on Twitter have got a point, because most nature is harsh and terrible and ends badly, right? And most people's lives aren't great. Right? And we've got great lives, so we don't need religion. So who are we to ruin it for those people who have got nothing, who think, at least I'll be rewarded in heaven? And it is, I sometimes think that, and that's why I don't run into churches or run into children's cancer wards and say there's no afterlife, because it's not my place, and I don't want to actually ruin people's day. But I do have the right, when asked, as you said, to say I don't believe in God. And then when they question me, I may say, because there's no evidence. And then when they show me evidence, I say, well, that's not evidence, that's a claim, that's a hope, that's a wish.
Well,
so you get more and more dug into and I do think Richard Dawkins gets accused of being sort of cruel and heartless and sort of don't have good people skills, but that's because he doesn't suffer fools, because he sort of knows.
Because he's right.
Well,
the reason he's like that is because he's right.
Well, I know, and that's a terrible position to be in, to be right. If my mum was
just the alienation and loneliness of being right.
Let me put a counter argument for the sake of interest, right? So a counter argument with which I have some sympathy is that it's not every time we try and build a society based on reason alone, it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And actually, societies are these complex organic things that emerge over time. So, for example, the House of Lords would be an example. Now, you may or may not like the House of Lords, but it kind of works in some sense as a stabilising influence.
You'll be there one day.
You wouldn't sit. Well, this is what I'm saying. It's fantastic. But you wouldn't sit down and invent the British Parliament the way it works.
No.
You wouldn't say we'll have an unelected chamber. You might have an appointed chamber, but you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't have a monarch. You wouldn't. But actually, societies are very complicated, and so they evolve. And the Church of England, you could argue, is one of the great, the great innovations that controls extremism.
Yeah.
So we haven't had extremism, religious extremism in this country. You could argue partly because we have a system that manages that desire to get together and celebrate things and sing some songs and watch the seasons passing.
But let's not forget what religious fundamentalist extremism is. It's believing the bad bits of your holy book too. It's believing the mental bits.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
But
not.
So you can argue that you don't want to rage against
No, I agree with
the
that.
structures that make this country stable.
Well, not just
with
this
some
country.
people are raging. I mean,
Not
we've
just
seen
this
it now.
country.
Right?
And
A great
one of the things
tussle in
about
Parliament
being a fundamentalist atheist is I think I am able, because I am so convinced of the non-existence of God, to allow
That's
that
beyond
religion-
atheism, though.
Well,
that's
no,
what I'm saying.
hang
That
on.
is beyond atheism. That's another
Alright.
step.
Well,
That's something.
well,
Yeah.
I am in that step.
Sure, yeah.
And one thing that
Me
allows
too.
me to do, I think, is I think there's much beauty and magic in religion. And actually, I think if you don't understand religion and the need for religion, you don't understand what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Well,
So
tell me, what do you mean by that? What is there? Tell me an example.
Well, there's much beauty and poetry in religion. I think there's great art.
Like there is
there's
in
great
fiction,
prose.
though.
Yeah, of course.
Of
Like
course.
there is in fiction. Yeah,
But
totally.
imagine-
I love fiction.
Of course, I love
would never
fiction,
disavow fiction.
but I know it's fiction,
No,
and
you
so
know.
does everyone else, and
No,
that's the problem.
Of course. No, don't misunderstand me.
No,
what
I
I'm
know.
saying is, I look at great art, of which most until about 1900 was about religion. You know, I look at
Because the church and the king were
you
the
know,
only people
I-
that could afford
you
to
know,
pay an artist to keep him. Yeah.
John Donne is one of my favourite poets. Most of what he wrote is about religion.
course.
And, you know, even, say, Philip Larkin's Church Going, which is a poem by someone who wasn't really a believer, but just talks about being a serious place on serious earth. It is just about the way you can feel in a church. I feel all that stuff, and that, for me, is partly to do with my absolute knowledge that it's based on a fiction. That's
Absolutely
how I
agree.
can feel it.
How beautiful is It's a Beautiful Life?